it's like there compared into the American police brutality. So as we all know, police brutality does exist. It does exist in a lot of cases. But mainly what I want to bring out to you guys is how horrible it is in Africa and why a lot of people from Africa leave their countries to come to USA, which is a lot more better, more functional. They have a controlled system where a lot of these criminals that are police officers can be contained and controlled as well. There are pros and cons of policing, which is in cons we have police brutality, and in pros we have police that serves and protect the community that actually does their job. So just to start with my little introduction here, meanwhile in Africa, police brutality has been happening for decades. Something you rarely hear about due to the corruption of the African leadership and government. Many suffer a lot in the hands of police and families buries their pain. With the American democracy exposing liberation against police brutality, African countries found the motivation to speak out their problems too. The only difference is it becomes a race war in the United States, while in Africa it is more of a political issue in the name of the power and money. So there are three things I'm going to cover today that the police does in Africa. One is abduction, and two is torture, and three is stealing and lying. A lot of these cases happens a lot where you have police officers in the community or people in the community that are pretending to be cops. Those that are pretending to be cops are those who wants to use their criminal nature in a way to act, to pretty much do whatever they want to do, you know, by betraying the image of a police officer. Now, in a lot of these cases, it happened a lot, and I'm going to tell you guys my story a little bit towards the end after I explain these three details. After my three visits in going to Africa, I go every year, except this year due to the coronavirus, and I have witnessed a lot of different police brutality in most of my visits. So, number one is abduction. Many abduction, kidnapping, or someone just simply goes missing is a common thing in Africa. Especially journalists, reporters, musicians, and even regular citizens who dare to speak or stand against the government party. Where they get abducted to is commonly unknown, pretty much. The families are unaware of where their loved ones is and sometimes are threatened if they don't keep silence. So basically, the abduction and the kidnapping, if you're a musician, you're very well known. Most musicians in Africa, they sing about the politics that goes on in the country. And they mostly talk about, you know, the lifestyle of the people, what is going on in the country. They are like the testimony of what is going on in the country. So through their music, you can hear a lot of different issues that are happening in the country. For example, like South Sudan, which is very big in war and a lot of different tragedies happening here and there. A lot of their musicians, they sing out those stories in order for their voices to be heard. In other cases like Ethiopia, we have very legendary musicians in each region, which you guys have heard. One of the Oromo legendary musicians, I can't pronounce his name at the moment, but every Oromo probably knows about him. All knows about him. He's a big legendary musician who sang a lot about these political things and recently just got killed. And they did ended up finding out the killers after all the protests that has been going on, and I'm not sure it's because of the protests that are happening here in the United States, people here trying to raise their voice, and they do that here in this country because you have the freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is what helps being heard, where in Africa, now there's a lot of chaos going on, mainly in Ethiopia, where the protesters, there's riot, there's looting, there's buildings being burned down, they shut down the internet. So we don't see what is going on right now at this point. The people there in Ethiopia, they can't connect with the diaspora, and the diaspora are just kind of left in the dark, don't even know what's really going on in Ethiopia. And that's what the Ethiopian government does. So every time there's a chaos going on in the country, they shut down the internet. And that's one of the biggest strategies that they use, just like China. China, when the people are trying to raise their voices, freedom of speech, they shut down the internet. It's mostly what goes on in third world countries so that you can't be heard, the whole world can't know about what's going on. So even activists that are diaspora or people that are trying to speak against a lot of these cases cannot be heard or report their cases to the United Nations or other bigger organizations that could help raise this awareness. So with kidnapping and abduction, if you have a family member mostly in the political world or that talks about government or anything like that, they just simply go missing. So, and you normally don't hear about where they are, where they go, or hear any updates. You'll be really lucky if they actually come back alive. So that's mostly the problem that goes there in Africa. And it's majority of the time they're trying to hide the things that are happening in the political world, in the African world, because these political leaders, they believe that, you know, when these people talk about the issues that they are doing, that they are exposing them. So for them to kidnap and abduct activists or musicians or celebrities of Africa, to me, it only shows a lot more that they are hiding something. So, and a lot of the politicals there in Africa, they're much older age. They have been sitting in the chair for decades. So these younger generations don't get the chair. They don't get the opportunity to take over the office and make these changes. And it's mostly in dictatorship, communist parties, and communism, where one person is in the chair forever. They want to run, they want to control the country, they don't want to leave the chair. They don't want to transfer it to the younger ones. So when these younger ones get infuriated about the politics of what is going on, they get abducted. So that's one thing I want to talk to you guys. So the torturing, that's the second thing that happens a lot in Africa. As you guys seen in West Africa, like Nigeria and some of the other Western African there, they have this specific torture that they do to the civilians, where they have their hands tied completely to their back from here to here, like so far back to their back, and then they there's different ways. They're very graphic, very graphic, very disturbing, and then they usually will hang their hands and their feet together while their belly is like facing down. And then to make it even worse, they'll put like a rock right on their back, and just to cause more pressure where you can't breathe and just to stop the blood flow. That's some of the tortures that goes on. And these are police that are doing that to them. And these people, same reason they get tortured for it is, you know, is if you speak up against politics, if you speak up against the government, you speak up against anything that may discredit the country or that may have the country look bad, a lot of those things happens. So many who are abducted are usually taken to secret places no one knows and are tortured until the kidnapper gets the truth or what they want. In some cases, they are tortured to death and are never seen again. So some of these tortures, they can be very, very graphic. They can be very painful, and until you pretty much speak the truth. Like you guys probably heard in the past, a lot of the kidnapping with the Boko Haram and all those other terrorist groups and extremists that are kidnapping regular citizens. And then, you know, they put them into sex trafficking and other, you know, things to please their agenda or anything that they are trying to do. So a lot of these police, they're criminal over there. I don't even know if I would call them police, you know. It's kind of more like a hardcore military or patrols that really don't have sense of humanity. And that's one of the second thing that happens if there is major. Now the last thing, which is stealing and lying. African problem is most likely about money and politics. For example, if the government wants your land, they may negotiate a compensation. Then suddenly you became a target for the undercover thieves going after your money. Now, this is something that's recently going on a lot, and I mean like now, in this month. Right now we're in July of 2020. There has been some recent cases, and I've been hearing some testimonies of some families that are going through it, where their family members are missing. And, you know, a government will, if they want your land and they want to build something specific on it that will benefit them, or they want to sell it to the foreigners to make more money out of them, they will usually reach out to you and they'll try to make a compensation. There was a family member that was compensated over 1 million Ethiopian birr, and over that $1 million, she got the compensation, but some random thieves, okay, knew about this and they decided to kidnap her. So these guys are money hungry. They kidnap you and then they will try to use you to get whatever they want. For one example, if they want a new car or they want to start a business or anything like that, they will keep you in a secret place, torture you until, you know, you give them whatever they want in your name, basically. So later on is another sneaky way to kind of get away with, like, you know, stealing things from the government in your name, because then later on it's not going to reflect back on them. But the good news is, you know, she is safe. She's back home. But in some cases, some of these people don't even return. That's how sad it is. So with the thieves, which are so extremely aggressive, like they have no sense of emotions, whatever. These are the main extremists going on in undercover. A lot of times you don't even know where they come from. You don't know who sent them. You don't even know who they are, okay? They just happen to know your background. They just happen to know, okay, you have this certain amount of money, and they come after you, and somehow you get abducted. And another thing too, I want to mention with the police brutality there, and I'm going to speak this based on my experience. 2 years ago, no, about a year ago, I was in my country in Ethiopia, and a couple of friends of mine, we decided to go out. So while we went out, we were having a good time, you know, and some of these guys, random guys or whatever, they're trying to like come to you, holler at you, or speak with you, and they're so kind. Like the way they behave with you, you would think they wouldn't do anything wrong. That's how deceiving they are. Of course, you know, my friend was like, you can't trust anyone. You can't trust anyone here. And of course, you know, when you grew up in America and that's the only culture, the system you know very well, you kind of fall for it. You're like, oh, they're really nice people. You know, they're wonderful people. I mean, what could they do wrong? What could they possibly do wrong? And then my friend was like, no, you can't trust them at all. You know, that's the game they play there. So there's a lot of games. So if you're going to try to, you know, survive there in Africa, you got to really know the game and be really intelligent about it. So anyway, as we were done hanging out there, we left and tried to leave to go to the next place, which is a little bit more high-end. That's where most of the foreigners go. Just right after we walked out the door, then one of the worker that worked at the restaurant came after us and said, oh, you guys forgot to pay for your drinks or whatever. And so my friend went back, and then the other friend followed, and now here I am still walking without realizing that my friends went back in to try to take care of the receipt balance, which we pretty much took care of it. But they wanted to make a lie. It was a trick. It was a trick to keep me alone because they knew I was a foreigner. And even though they already paid for it, they kind of used an excuse like, oh, you know, you didn't pay the whole balance. And then later on, they'll be like, oh, actually, you took care of all of it. It was our mistake. So anyway, while I was out there, then these guys that were standing next to a van approached me in a very gentle way, and then all of a sudden it led into feeling like I was being abducted. So they put me next to the van. I thought they were gonna abduct me. I thought that was it. I was yelling, I was screaming at the name of my friends. And of course they were not anywhere near, so they couldn't hear me anyway. And I'm just like, this is it, you know? And while they got me in the van, then one of the guys like snatched my purse and ran with it. And somehow I was alone by myself, and then they pretty much let me alone, and I started running after them. That's the funny part. And as I was continuing to run after them, I knew I couldn't catch them anyway. And I was talking to some of the police officers that were on the street, and they were saying, you know, where's the thief? How does he look like? We were trying to give him a description. One of the other guys that were standing there, we weren't even sure if they were really police, and he was like, oh, don't trust the police, and the police themselves are also thieves. So anyway, long story short, next day in the morning, I got a call, and I went to the police station, and the police said, you know, is this your purse? I screamed because I thought everything that was in that purse was gonna be gone and I would never see them again, because that's mostly what they will tell you and things like that. But I didn't give up. I didn't give up hope. That's one thing. And then they showed me. They set up a court date, and when we went into the court date, they showed us the picture of the guy and if this is the guy who stole your stuff. And oh my gosh, I recognized him, and it was kind of intimidating at the same time because he was still aggressive. Like he was still trying to make up stories to defend himself, to make himself feel like he was the victim in any ways, you know. Luckily, the guy who caught my purse, he was also a police officer. Oh my gosh, you would never think there would be a good Samaritan out there. So most of the police brutality that happens in Africa, it's like 99% of the police are bad, and then you have that one good apple that that just changes the whole scenario and just gives you hope. So this police officer caught the thief, and the thief was telling him, you know, we can sell these and it's worth a lot of money, and then we could split the money and share it and do whatever we want, you know? That's the game. That's how they play it. They manipulate the thieves are like the front line. They go and do the do the crime, and then they take it back to the police, and they're covered by those police, by the way, and then they dispute the money or whatever they gain out of it. But this cop stood out and said, nope, I am a man of God, and I believe in God, and so we're going to go together, and the police stations are going to decide on this. So the police station decided, and I know the system right now, they're working on some of the changes and try to, you know, capture a lot of these bad cops that are in the system and try to eliminate them, because majority of the cops that are in the system, they're bad. They're extremely bad. So they captured the thief, and I got a lawyer, and there was 3 witnesses that stood with me, and all of our story matched, and everything was the same, while the thief had his story made up. You know what they said. Once you lie once, you have to come up with another lie to cover another lie. So luckily, thank to God, we won the case, and the man was sent to prison for 5 years. So that was new to me. That was very, very new, because before then, during the time of Meles, thieves were out there in a broad daylight, and police themselves were like the back people that wait for these thieves to come for whatever they want them to steal for them, you know? That was the case then. It was never safe for you to walk outside in a broad daylight. Like your purse, you would have to like literally hold it tight so that, you know, if a thief try to come and take it away, then they take you and the purse with. That's how bad it used to be. But now things are starting to change. They're starting to change some of the regulations and the rules and stuff. So if a thief gets caught, they will be thrown to prison, which is a really wonderful thing, and that's a good sign for a country in Africa. Even though there's still some police brutality, a lot of them are still trying to get away with it and the rules and things like that. And the majority of the time, you can't even tell the difference who is the real police and who is not, because they all wear the same uniform. and the bad police, it just makes it so hard for the good police to even stand out at all. Like, you don't even find out that that person is a good police until you come face to face in court. That's the only time you'll know. And the back word about the legal system over there is that they find a verdict on your case based on what happened, the last thing that happened. Where here in the United States, if you go to the court of law and you testify, or they look back into, finding out if you're guilty or not, they look into the history, the day you and that person met and the things that happened until they come to the final verdict to see who is guilty or not. Where in Africa, it is more of what happened at that moment. Now, say your story, explain to us why you are innocent, why you should be convicted guilty. And usually the thieves and the liars, they get away with it because they're so good at like putting their stories together. They're so good at manipulating the system. And they usually end up winning the case, where the good guys ended up losing, which is a very sad and tragic way. So that's a lot of the things that happen there. So over there in Africa, you kind of have to be very vigilant. You have to stay very alert. You have to pretty much keep close to everything that you have. But things are slowly getting better. They're getting better now. This year I haven't went back, so I don't know how much have changed, but I know like in Ethiopia, so much have dramatically changed. Now, in some of the cases that you see in other countries like South Sudan, there's a lot of military war going on where people are becoming soldiers themselves to defend their land, to defend their tribes and things like that. And these are the regular citizens, the regular civilians that are taking power into their own control to protect their community, to protect their tribes and their lands against these militants. And a lot of times these militants, they only follow what the government and the politicians do, because the politicians themselves are mostly thieves. They take out money from the award-winning, like a prime minister who just won a peace Nobel award for the refugees. There's still a lot of refugees suffering in Ethiopia. There's still a lot of refugees that are being killed by the militant. There's still a lot of them that are being kidnapped. There's still a lot of them that are being tortured. There's still a lot of them that are being abducted. Now, for the prime minister to win a peace Nobel is completely bizarre. Like, he doesn't even deserve it. I mean, hey, that's our prime minister. But a lot of times, that's what they do. These politicians, they look good on the outside, but what goes on inside the country is it's a lot of tragic. So, our prime minister who won a peace Nobel award, but then you still have refugees that are going through major terrors every day. The border is not even very well protected. So the border between South Sudan and Ethiopia, a lot of the people that are fleeing the South Sudan country because of the civil war and the genocide that is happening there, they're coming to the Ethiopian border. Now, while they're being in the Ethiopian border, they're not there for free, okay? The United Nations pay the leader of the country, gives them money for these refugees to stay in the land until the country is stable again, until they're able to return back home. But they don't have any protection. Nobody's protecting them. The prime minister of the country is not protecting them. The president of their own country is after them, trying to genocide them or kill them, and definitely not protecting them either, But they're getting money through these lives. These politicians are getting money from lives that are being lost, innocent lives that are being killed, and they're going through starvation and famine and things like that. So a little thing they do here and there is what they try to show to the world, that we're doing something, we're helping the refugees, we are feeding them, we're giving them medical and things like that. But in the true reality, there's still a lot that goes on in the refugee camp. So, and you don't hear about this, you don't see a lot about this, because the network is controlled by the government. The government only shows you what the world wants to see and what will only look good on them. They don't show the truth and the reality of what goes on in the country. So nobody knows. Nobody really knows about all this. The only way you can even hear about these stories and testimony is from the people in the country themselves. okay, of what they're facing and what they're going through. Now, thanks to social media, you can see a lot of things that is happening. People can post pictures and things like that. But once things start to go viral a little bit, the government steps in and shut down the network again. Like right now, what is happening with the Oromo protest in Ethiopia, you don't see much about it anymore because the network is cut off. And it usually can last for a month or two until they calm everything down. So things that happen there in third world country, which are mostly communist countries, people don't have freedom of speech, people don't have all the qualities that we have here in this country, and that's why we leave our countries to come into this country, into the USA, because we want a better life. We want to be able to feed our children. We want to be able to send them to good schools. We want to be able to work. We want to be able to achieve our dreams and accomplish something, which is what America perfectly stands for, a land of free, a land of dreams, trying to reach the American dreams. So we leave our countries because of these things, And where in Africa, you don't have that same opportunity. If you try to open a business, for example, the politicians or the government, the prime minister, whoever is running that country, charge you a ton of taxes. And you are put on a limit. There's a cap on your capitalism of how much you can make or how far you can go. So they control whether you become rich or just comfortable or whatnot. So if you end up becoming rich, then you become like a target. Where you have thieves trying to, rob your business, trying to get a portion out of your wealth. And then you also have the governors, the leaders there that are raising taxes so high that you have to pay for them. Anything that gets imported into the country also has a tax too as well. So you're barely making anything, you're barely surviving, but we get by a little here and there, a little here and there in Africa. So those are struggles what a lot of people go through. So we're going to take a little short break, and then now I'm going to go on into the police brutality here in the United States. And I'm going to play one of this amazing song by Yami Alade and Angelique Kidjo. So I hope you guys can hear very well. Here we go. All right, welcome back. I wanted to play that song because it reminds you of how beautiful and amazing Africa is. The people in Africa, the land, the country, the nature, the animal is such an amazing country. And it's so unfortunate, going through this coronavirus, all this corruption that we have to go through, and of course, the wickedness in the world. So continue on with the police brutality. So I'm going to name out some few countries that are currently going through police brutality right now, and also trying to create reform and trying to change some of the policing into their countries, which is a pretty good. It's a huge step in the African countries. So South Africa, I'm going to start with South Africa. Ever since the killing of George Floyd, South Africans joined the action against police brutality under a coronavirus lockdown. Thousands have attended Black Lives Matter demonstration in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, to speak up in the violence against poor and Black communities. Unlike America here, South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in Africa, more than 2 decades after the end of white minority rule, with urban areas divided along racial lines. More than 42,000 complaints were made about the police between 2012 and 2019, including rape, killings, and torture, with the killing of police brutality, which has tripled in the last decades. It leaves questions to understand if these are isolated incidents or if they are made of symptomatic problems. After a man's death in his home, they were told by the High Court to order the government to set up a mechanism to enable the public to complain about the abuses. How South African acknowledged, even though there is still a great divide between race and classes, COVID-19 has opened up the brutal inequality, and they still hope change will come. In South Africa, it's not a lot different from here in America, because South Africa went through the same, colony that happened here in the United States, where the white men came and there was division, there was segregation, there was a symptomatic racism going on in South Africa. As far as now, we don't know if there's a lot of those going on, but according to a lot of these news that has been reported in South Africa, there has been a division between the poor community and the rich community, where a majority of the white people are in the rich community and the majority of the South Africans themselves are in the poor community. The crime rate is usually very common a lot in the poor community, and they are finally speaking out about this. They are trying to create reforms of the police brutality that are happening there. Meanwhile, the government told them that, go ahead and protest and let your complaints be known so that it can be looked at in the High Court. And that's what they're gonna have to go through. So we hope that the High Court can listen to these people, and I don't know if there's like a bullet where you have to vote or anything like that to resign some of the leaders that are there that are not helping to solve the problem, and replace it with some of the new leaders that are willing to make some of these changes in South Africa as well. But there's a lot of demonstration going there with the police brutality. Now, in Nigeria, police brutality outnumbered those killed by COVID-19, which is set out to believe that Nigerian police are suspected of having carried out 18 extrajudicial killings between March 30 and April 13. About 77% of Nigerians reported that police brutality is ultimately high, which is about 8 out of 10 people that are killed and attacked. 8 out of 10, that's really high. So 8 out of 10 Nigerians are killed by the police. A lot. I don't know if it's like this year alone or altogether, but that's a pretty high percentage. Many of these cases of police brutality have been announced in 24 Nigerian states, including larger cities like Lagos and Abuja. According to numbers of the security forces, problem with citizens escalated due to violence of quarantine. As NRHC explained, many Nigerians risk their lives avoiding to stay home because they have to go out to work and provide for their daily livelihood. So it's a simple case where in Africa, you have a choice between quarantine or breaking the rule. So most people over there, there's a lot of property, there's a limitation of food, so there's not enough money or finance, and the government is not gonna give stimulus. They give stimulus to some of the cities, but it's still not enough to provide for the family. So they have no choice but to break the quarantine regulations to try to go to work and make some money. And a lot of people are getting arrested for doing that. So, and because of the frustrations of the civilians, which escalated more with the police brutality, while being beat down in the middle of the street or being stripped, and also, being pretty much threatened. So it's like a war zone there. Where in Kenya, simple criminals like these are lit up with gas in the broad daylight. Now, this has been going on for many years in Kenya. There's a lot of horrible stories against police brutalities in Kenya, where a thief, just for stealing a cell phone, like as simple as a cell phone, they will, if they even catch you, okay, they will put you in the middle of the street, put a tire around you, pour gas on you, and light you up on fire. That's what the police does in Kenya. It's like trying to imagine it, you wouldn't even want to live there. That's how bad it is, And that's something that has been going on for a very, very long time in Kenya. That kind of police brutality is against humanity altogether. So, with something like, stealing a phone, there's rulers, there's court. You take them to court and they pay the fine or they return the fine or things like that. There's a dispute that could be done instead of lighting the person on fire. But no, typically the police officers will take the thief, put them in the middle of the street, tie the tie around them, and lit them with gas. So now whether that's still going on in Kenya or not, we don't know for sure, but a lot of that dropped here and there, but there's still a few of that going on. And also with homophobia, if you're homosexuality or anything like that, whether you're gay or lesbian, you get hunted down. So, and if they find you, they will kidnap you, abduct you, they will torture you, they will kill you in a broad daylight. They will kill you. And a lot of the graphic images are very, very disturbing. If you guys want to go ahead and Google it, police brutality in Kenya, or even other countries in Africa, just to get an idea what police brutality is like there, you'll find it very, very disturbing. And then now in Ethiopia, after the death of a famous Oromo legendary singer, Hakalu Handessa, I could be pronouncing it wrong, but it is a really long stretch name. A rise of violence killing 80 civilians rise as they were told at a community meeting to arm themselves with anything they have, including machetes and sticks. At this point, there is no trust between the police and the civilian. So there was, I believe, is between 80 to 300 civilians that were killed recently since the protest broke out in Ethiopia. They lit some of the buildings on fire in Addis Ababa, and the police themselves are pretty much fighting in the street with the police. Back in the old days, like I mentioned earlier with Meles time and things like that, if a thief, eat at a restaurant and they didn't fully pay their receipt or they were short on a balance, they have to somehow come up with a way to pay for it. And if they still don't pay for it or they somehow talk back to the police, they will get beaten with a stick, like really hard, okay? Some get beaten to the point they go unconscious. I don't know how much a body can take, but they go unconscious. And there were so many thieves in the country so far, so bad enough that if you try to run, they will shoot you right there. And I can understand, a lot of these criminal acts that were happening in Ethiopia, in this country at the time, people were like completely wicked to do whatever they want. They would steal in the broad daylight, as I mentioned earlier in the part of the talk show. But now where things are better, there's more law, there's more regulations and things like that. If they don't talk or they don't talk very well with most Ethiopians, they don't really like to talk about what's going on, so they're just kind of mumble and stuff like that. And if you talk mumbling or you have your face down and things like that, they will beat you until your body can't handle it anymore. And sometimes you're laying there unconscious and they're still beating you, and then you're like, oh my God, is that person dead or still alive? So that's the police brutality there in Ethiopia. So now going on to the police brutality here in America. Here in America, I really wanted to bring out this police brutality in the other side of the country, so you have an idea and understand why a lot of us, we come into this country and why there's so many foreigners and why America is such an amazing country that everybody want to do everything they can to get in, where Mexican border is one easy way to get into the country. I'm sure if Africa didn't have an ocean between them, or if they can actually swim the ocean, they would swim all the way to America. So police brutality here in the United States, things has gone a little bit worse lately. And it's mostly because now there's more technology, there's social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, you name it. So whenever something happens, people can easily record it, go live, and the whole world sees it, okay? But for a lot of us foreigners here, we see majority of the police in the policing department are good. We would mostly say, about 75 to 99% of the police in the United States are good police, okay? So when you have that one bad cop in the police department, that one bad cop that does one little thing or that run into the wrong person or things like that, and then they get recorded, and then somehow they don't know how to handle the situation anymore, and things escalate, and then now both people are frustrated, which ends up leading to a lot of the unharmed civilians that are killed in the United States. And then at the end, then the people will speak on it, and everybody will side with the unharmed man, and then the police get fired or get sent to jail. Of course, back to what happened with George Floyd, it was something that should have never happened, and it was one of those rare cases that everybody knew it was wrong, and he was punished for it. Now, here's the difference for that. The police officers here, the bad apples who are killing these unarmed civilians, these are the people they should get rid of in the police department. I don't know, maybe like do a background check or do like an assessment reading. Like when you get a job, they actually do a math and reading and writing. They do all the assessments, and they ask you like, how would you handle dealing with an employee if they were having an outrage or they disagree with you? How would you try to solve the solution and things like that? I don't know if they do that in the police department, but it's something that they should really do before they hire a police officer, is do these assessments to evaluate if this person is fit for the job or not, or if they are mentally well and they can handle an escalated situation, or if they can handle dealing with someone that is so difficult to deal with, or even a lot of cases where there's mostly resistance arrest. I believe they should then again, we're all human beings. So as a human being, sometimes we lose control, we lose the things that we do. So it's hard to know, but I believe they should still, assess those and go through it, and then know exactly who is to hire and who is more capable of doing the job without killing the person. So, and for example, like in Europe, police don't have guns. There's no guns. Where here in America, everybody has their amendment right to bear arms. So citizens can have a gun in their home as long as they have a license to carry the gun. All the police out in the street all have guns. So every police has a gun. Like God said, those who killed by the gun will die by those who killed by the sword will die by the sword. So mainly the citizens have guns, the police have guns. So it's easy to take a person out just based on who wins or who loses. And some of the things that I will bring out here that I most commonly see here with the police brutality in America, resisting arrest. So when you're resisting arrest, you start to come into a wrestle mode. So now the police have to use their strength and everything they have, their ability they have to arrest you because you're resisting arrest. So for most citizens out there, there's like this fear that we all have in this country where all of a sudden we react in the wrong way. It's very easy and very quickly to react in the wrong way where things can escalate and you end up losing your life. But resisting arrest is one of the most common things that I see. And I think people are posting videos so much on social media that is really starting to become obnoxious. There was a live stream video that was that went viral today of these, I believe they're like 3 or 4. I'm going to say 3 young boys that got pulled over by the police. So we don't know what happened before that. We caught the recording where they're at the scene and the police officer is pointing at the boys and they're telling them, to get out and pointing the gun at them. And the boys are terrified. I would be terrified, of course, if a police point the gun at me, but you still have to listen to the commands and whatever they command you to do. So the boys were talking back. like using the cuss word and the foul language and things like that. And one of the boys was saying, we don't have a gun, we don't have a gun. And the police said, we don't know that. We don't know that you don't have a gun. So the police can't just trust you based on what you say. So no matter how many times the boys were saying, put the gun down, we're not going to come out because you're pointing the gun at us. And we're telling you we don't have a gun. And the police is saying, we don't know that. We don't know that. So one of the boys finally got out. He walked out slowly. And, then he had his hand up and the police put the handcuffs on him. That was easy. So got thrown in the car. And now the next boy is scared to get out. He didn't want to get out of the car because he felt threatened. He felt scared with the gun being pointed at him. And, no matter how many times they say they don't have a gun, the police is not going to believe that. So the police job was to command you on what you should do. So, the fear that is now in the Black and the minority community is seeing a cop is intimidating enough, and leave alone when you get pulled over. When you get pulled over, then that fear takes over, then it just rises, and then you start to act in a certain way, whether it's running. Now, if you run, then there's a higher chance that you're going to get shot in the back, or you're going to get tased, and if you resist arrest, there's a higher chance that the police is going to get really frustrated, and you guys are going to start wrestling to the ground until one person end up dead, like Richard Brooke case situation. Where in George Floyd's situation, he didn't resist any of the arrest. He complied with all of the commands, and still he got killed with a knee. Now, police is like that. These are the kind of changes we want to address so that people like that get prosecuted and things like that. But it's also very important for the citizens as well to respect the law and to comply as much as they can. God is in ultimate control. So if you trust the Lord, you trust the God you worship, and you know that, whatever happens is in God's control, leave it to Him. Majority of the time it's going to be in God's control, because this is always going to be a human-to-human battle. Now, police officers are human as well, so they have emotions, they have reactions. It's only more dangerous on the citizen because they have a gun in their hand. Now, foul language. So foul language is one of the most disrespectful things you can use to disrespect someone. So I'm starting to see a lot of videos where there's a lot of foul language, and the citizens, whenever the police comes to arrest them or to talk about them, they immediately aggravate and say, what are you arresting me for, or, F this, F that, or, all these foul language. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys seen this on social media, so you can take your own judgment for it. But for a police to know that they have the authority to arrest a criminal or to come into the scene, or they were called into the scene to try to solve the problem or solve the solution, and they're telling you what you should do, or they're asking you questions like, can we have your license or your registrations, and we need to make sure it's you, or let's check your identification. And the citizen is retaliating back with foul language and say, you don't need my ID, you don't need my registration, it's mine. And then police would probably say, oh, well, how do I know it's your car? I was like, oh, you'll find out later. So that kind of talking and communication, I don't know. Me personally, I don't even know how I would handle it. It's like, should I just walk out of the scene, leave it be, or, keep going until at some point somebody gets arrested? And usually what happens is the altercation keeps going until somebody gets arrested, even if it's a case that you probably wouldn't even get arrested anyway, But because you provoke it to a level where you're speaking extremely disrespectfully to the cops, and then it leads to you being arrested, which is some of the cases that I see, and it's pretty bizarre enough. It's like, what do you say back to that, So that's another one of the issues, is citizens have no respect for the law enforcement whatsoever. And all of that, I wanted to point it out because, in the minority community, in the Black community, we also have to work on those things. We have to work on ourselves, okay? like God says, it starts within you. It starts in your household, okay? The enemy is in your household. So if you don't check yourself and you don't try to correct yourself, or you don't look into the things that, that could be risky for your own life, it's going to mislead you on how you're going to behave out there. A bad behaviors can lead to the outside home. And majority of these homes, because there's no father in the household, there's a lot of, there's abuse, there's these things going on in a lot of the Americans' home. And I'm going to talk about both black and white people home, because white people go through a mental meltdown, and they go to tempers and things like that. These starts at home, and it starts within yourself. If you want change outside of home, you have to start transforming on the inside. And then you'll know how to communicate or, handle a situation better and things like that. You can't expect that with whatever behavior you're going to bring to the outside of the home, that you're going to be respected, or you're going to be followed, or they're going to listen to you, or they're just going to say, oh, you know what, you're just having a mental issue, or you're just having a problem, so we're gonna let you go, If you respond back in a much more manner way, majority of the time, the cop is more likely to let you go with a warning or with a ticket, or to say, hey, if you have a ticket, come to court and you can serve hours. You can abolish that ticket, in whatever way, if you're willing to work with the law enforcement. But whenever you're trying to resist and you're trying to act in your own behavioral way, it can lead you into very bad consequences. So those are some of the things that I want to bring out to you guys on how to handle the police brutality here. And of course, with us foreigners who are here, we know what it's like, to deal with the police brutality, no matter how much we respect it or how much we go through. So when we're here in this country, we're just happy that we can have a job, we can be entrepreneurs, we can be successful. So we're busy going out there trying to be the best of ourselves as much as possible without really having to altercate with the police. We're going to take a short break. I'm going to go ahead and play one more song, and then I'm going to give you guys my last part of the topic. Here we go. Uh-oh. Commercial. All right, I'm going to cut it there because we have a very short time left before we close this episode today. So I want to bring out some few little topics of what is going on in America today, problems in the United States of America. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are learning new terminologies, different words, different cultures, different things that we never even know really exist, especially if you're a foreigner and now you're like, oh, that's what that called when it's been happening. All right, so first thing I'm gonna start with is the cancel culture. The cancel culture, welcome to the real world, a world where nothing is fair. So with the cancel culture, it's all about what you say and what you believe, and if nobody agrees with it, you will get canceled. Your job may be contacted, or whoever you work for will be contacted until they said, oh, you're canceled. We don't need you anymore. Like Nick Cannon, who made a really, really negative statement about racism. Yep, that's one of the cancel culture there. And now he got canceled by his people who makes him rich. Now the other thing is Karen. So it takes a lot to sustain a spoiled nation. So we have a lot of spoiled brats here in this country, is what I kind of noticed. So Karen is this, white woman who is obnoxious, who is loud, who immediately reacts or feels threatened even when nothing is really happening. Thinking back to some of my childhood, when I deal with white people like that, and I'm just, I immediately assume they have mental illness. So assuming they have mental illness, then I don't, I just let it be and try not to interfere more. Where some of these cases, they really do have mental illness. but it's always playing the victim game when they poke you underneath, you know. And there's a saying in Africa, when somebody pins you underneath your thighs or whatever, and then you jump up, you start screaming, you start yelling at that person, and you start playing victims and stuff like that. And it's kind of like how Karen gets all loud and uproar. But majority of the time, Karen is the one that starts something and then ends up playing the victim later. Another thing is police are hitting back. So 300 police officers called in sick in LA. California is on a second lockdown, and Latinos are being hit really hard. So now in California, there's a lot of police reform going on, and the police are hitting back to it. So now whenever there's a crime scene and you try to call the police to get help, the police are not responding as they should, and they're also not arriving at the scene. So things are getting pretty worse in California right now. The teacher unions. So the teacher unions decided to get together to make a decision on the back to school for the children. And now there's a controversial issue whether the kids should go back to school or they should not. Me, as one of the parents, I would really have my kids be back to school. I decided to ask my 12-year-old, you know, what his opinion is, because it's like, it's really hard to know. With COVID-19, you don't want to risk it, because now the teachers are going to give you a death waiver, a COVID-19 death waiver to sign in case your child died of COVID-19, so you can't blame them later. That's pretty terrifying. For anybody that is a parent, that's pretty terrifying. So I was like, yeah, if I have to sign the death waiver, I'm good. I think I'll keep my kid at home, you know? Because usually with cases like this, viruses, I leave it to God. God is in control. Jesus said, you know, give all the children to me. And then a lot of these cases are very rare in the children's. Donald Trump is saying send the kids back to school because there are a lot of parents who needs to work. They need to work full time. So they depend on the school to in order to work for those times, especially single family households and low income households. And also kids is essential to them so they can interact with their friends, they could be able to get out. I don't know how a lot of children are handling this quarantine still being at home, but imagine a whole school year with kids being home. In LA, it is already happening right now. Kids are gonna be studying at home. Luckily, some of the private schools and the charter schools, a lot of the kids are going back to school. So they're still working on how they're gonna, you know, set their school rooms, their systems and things like that. Now, based on the CDC guidelines, 10% of the infants are positive with COVID-19 cases, and they become critically ill. So most majority of the children are like 15% and under that gets COVID-19. And a lot of the children in those cases too as well is those that have underlying. If you have an underlying condition, then COVID-19 is definitely a threat. Now, in New York, there's a mandatory law. Breaking quarantines, anyone who breaks a quarantine will be fined $2,000. Any travelers who is tested positive of COVID-19 has to quarantine for 14 days, or they will be fined $10,000. So if you go to New York and you're tested positive with COVID-19, you have to quarantine for 14 days. You cannot go anywhere. If they catch you out there, it's a $10,000 fine. And surprisingly, many citizens in New York are starting to move out of New York. All right, now the CDC and the CDC guidelines are saying that a second infection of COVID-19 could be much more worse and deadly than the first round. Now, I don't know if that really affects the underlying people, but I feel like COVID-19 have already took out all the people that it wants to take out. Like the elderly, people with other chronic illness and diseases and things like that. Now all the people that are left are those who either develop antibodies or who have a really good immune system, and the children's. And half of the states now, going on the face mask, are in mandatory face masks. So half of the states, they mandate face masks. So you have to wear a face mask wherever you go, even if it's regular shopping at Cut Food or Walmart. You must wear a face mask. And if they catch you without a face mask, they will come to you and ask you to wear a face mask. And then if you don't, good luck on that end, because it's not going to look good. And it's basically because the country isn't keeping up with the virus, and Americans are not healthy enough right now. That's why Europe decided to close the border, so Americans can't go to Europe. And everyone else was asking, based on the riot and the protests that are still going on, where is the church? Well, the church and the saints are too busy praying for the better of this country. Thank you, everyone, and see you all again next Saturday. Have a good night.